Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Ozgur K. Sahin.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
I'm going to hit the magic button here.
You hit that magic button.
We're on.
We're on.
Yes. So do like straight and talk.
Yeah. So this is episode 17.
Are you sure it's 17?
Yes, because last month we said it was 15, but it was actually 16.
Was it really?
It is. It was. We got it wrong.
I wonder.
We messed it up.
No, we made a mistake.
We did. We made a mistake. Only one.
Okay, well, that's not bad in 3 years or something? That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
So, let me fix this. You are like lucky 17. Is that a thing? And it is now. I just made it. So, I mean, like to me, the 17th is St. Patrick's Day, right? And the Irish are known for their luck, right?
Right. There you go.
There you go. So does that make Oscar COVID-6 or COVID-7? Were we also off on that?
I don't even know.
We'll have to figure that out. Yeah, I mean, the months they're just a blur lately.
Well, 7 is my lucky number, but I think this is month 6.
Okay, we'll just say it's 7.
Well, okay.
And then we'll correct it next month if we need to.
I'm sure somebody among our 13.5 million listeners will let us know if we are.
Yeah, that'll call us on it, I'm sure. We'll get some sort of mean comment.
Right, and they might even make a meme of us. That would be actually pretty cool. I want to be a meme, so I shouldn't say that.
So what's new with you? What's new with you, Laura?
Well, for a life where in theory we're all just kind of shut in our houses, it seems like there is constant stuff going on here because I had 2 sons leave for college this month. So we went from 7 of us in the house back down to 5. So one of them went down south to Winona and another one went up north to Fargo. So I've got a junior and a freshman. I have more students coming back, so that's exciting.
That's a good thing.
It's a really good thing because my kids keep wanting to eat every single day.
Yeah,
they're picky like that. Like feed me.
Let's eat. Come on.
Yeah, what's that all about? So I think I'm back up to like 18 or 19 students, which I had been teaching over 50. So it's it's still low compared to what it was. Getting editing jobs, and I have a new book, possibly 2 new books coming out for my small publisher, Gabriel's Horns. So I am currently working on editing one of those books about the Armenian genocide. It's not really about that. That's a little bit of backdrop, but it's about facing all the garbage that happens in life, which probably everybody listening to us can relate to this past 6 months, right? Yeah. So, that's what I'm up to. How about you?
I have started my tour, which is now a non-tour. We are doing all of our college shows via Zoom, and that it comes with all sorts of weird issues. We've had in the middle of one show, or towards the end of one show, we had Zoom just drop the host.
Just gone, huh?
So my other moderator, I wasn't working that show. My other moderator was working the show, and I was logged in so that I could watch what was happening via Zoom, and it just dropped him.
Just gone.
Fortunately, we make the actor cam is a separate participant, and we make that participant a co-host. Fortunately, we do that because as soon as he dropped, then the actor cam became the host, and I could run down to the actor cam and make my computer a co-host so that he could come to my computer and run the rest of the show.
So you're
And it went
running
off
around
without a
between
hitch.
computers.
Nobody knew.
Great.
Crazy
Yeah, I know
tech.
we were talking just before the show started about technology because I'm Zoom and Skype too, teaching lessons by it.
Then Saturday we
Oh,
had my computer, so the actor cam, Zoom just froze, and I couldn't get it unfrozen. And
I'm
that
doing a
happened
lot of
10
that.
minutes before the show was supposed to start.
Did you get it fixed before it started?
No, we had to use one of my actors for some reason, had a computer with him. We used that computer, but we started the show 40 minutes late.
So are your actors like all on a stage together, or are they all in separate houses doing their own Zoom? Or
No, they're
how
all on
does that
stage
work?
together.
Okay. So there is a Zoom camera watching them, zooming it out to the college students.
Yeah, and then the moderator is on a separate computer.
Okay, and you're in your house.
No, we're in the
Oh,
same
you're
space.
down there too with them. Okay.
But see, now since I'm doing this and professionally, and I have to look good, I've got fancy lighting and.
Oh, cool. It's kind of like a storm. I'm thinking like Heathcliff and Catherine or something there.
Yeah. So for the folks who watch the video clips on YouTube, you could see I just raised the light level and dimmed the light level. It's very exciting.
And for those who only hear it, let me just guarantee it was really, really cool. Don't just take my word for it. What have you been reading this month? Or
I have not been reading anything. I still have Paradise Lost sitting on my desk, though, waiting to be read.
Like a couple more pages?
Oh, no, I haven't picked it up.
Well, I have you covered again this month.
Okay, good.
Back. Although I only have your back because I read like half of a little book I've heard called The Wrath of the Brotherhood. I'm sorry, Oscar, I didn't finish it. Through Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which is not The Invisible Man, it's a different one about this guy who's, I won't talk about Wrath of the Brotherhood because we're going to spend an hour doing that. Of an Invisible Man is about this guy who's at, I don't know, some kind of research facility, and there's a student group protesting something, and they manage to blow the whole place up, and it turns him invisible because of whatever the scientist has been working on, and they're all, gets in the air, turns him invisible. And so it's about how government agents are trying to find him, and he's finding out that being invisible, it's not quite as easy as you would think to sneak under the radar. So it's really interesting as you read about this, all the ways that they can potentially find him, even though they can't see him.
That actually sounds kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it, but for somebody who lost my entire job in this COVID thing, boy, I seem to have plenty to do. I actually got a lot of editing jobs, so I'm doing that. I'm doing there's always plenty to do. So yeah, it's taking me a long time to get my normal reading done. So,
who's our guest today?
Well, I am very excited about our guest today. And in fact, I've mentioned him in a couple previous shows. His name has come up in part because I was trying to read his book, but like I said, it's been crazy busy. So we have with us today Ozgur K. Sahin. Ozgur K. Sahin is an award-winning historical novelist and life coach. His second book, True Colors, was released late last year as a sequel to The Wrath of the Brotherhood. He's currently working as a life coach while hunkered down during this pandemic and working on a nonfiction book on narcissism. He grew up in Minneapolis, and his studies range from astrophysics and history to meditation and development studies. So welcome, Ozgur.
Hi, it's good to be here today.
Welcome.
Yeah, I am thrilled to have you here. So I'll tell you how I met Ozgur after you present our beer and we hear his first reading.
All right. So the beer for this first reading is not beer at all. The beer for this first reading is cider. Little known fact, I am all about cider. I'm almost more interested in cider than beer. And I'm particularly interested in French and Spanish ciders. So I've chosen a Spanish cider for this. Oh, you've got like a nice ice bucket.
I do. I do.
Mayador is a delicious Spanish
Oh, I
cider.
thought you said you adore, but I see Mayador.
So I chose this because, we're looking at Spanish colonial pirates and sailors and whatnot in the 1600s, I believe.
Yeah, it's 1660.
Yeah. So for this first reading, I really was just trying to think, what would they drink? And in the Basque region of Spain, that's where the cider region of Spain. Cider is huge, and it goes way, way back. They've been making cider in the Basque region forever. So it just occurred to me that, cider is probably one of the things that they're drinking. And the cider houses in that region, they open up for a very short time during the cider season. They've got, it has a cork. It's a fancy bottle.
It is.
So the cider houses open. They ferment the cider in these huge wooden casks that have a chalk in them in a hole that keeps them closed. And when you're pouring cider, you go into the cider house and you pay a flat fee. You get a meal and cider, pretty much all the cider you can drink. And when they pour the cider, somebody will yell out, I can't remember the word now, but it means chalk. And that means somebody's going to open a barrel. And everybody runs in with their glass. They pull out this pin, and cider just sprays out in this arc. And you stick your glass under it and catch it. So ideally, with the Spanish ciders, you pour them from a great height. If you watch the cider tenders in bars in that region of Spain, it's pretty amazing because they will hold the cider bottle way up here over their heads, and they'll hold the glass way down at their hip and pour like this. and hit the glass.
Like an art.
So it kind of creates, it creates a little bit of, because the ciders are still, they're not carbonated, but it creates a little bit of, effervescence as air gets trapped from that agitation.
Do I have to do that here in my house?
You will make a mess if you do that there in your house.
I can guarantee it.
So pour carefully, because there is schmutz. There is like yeast schmutz in the bottom. So pour carefully.
That was my question.
Yeah. Spanish ciders are really funky.
Funky in what way?
Highly acidic.
Okay.
A little bit vinegary acidic. Cheers. Sorry, we're drinking in front of you, Oscar.
Cheers.
I apologize.
That's all right. I don't drink anyway.
All right. Well, then it's all good. So they're kind of acetic, acid, kind of vinegary, a little bit barnyardy. It's the wild fermentation creates all these funky flavors. They're not for everybody.
It's a little bit like sipping a crab apple.
Yeah.
It's very kind of
a crab apple in vinegar.
Well, it's almost that season.
So that's what I chose, why I chose it. So, Oscar, what is our first reading?
All right. Well, this is, like I said, set in 1660, and the crew of this privateer ship is just about to attack. It's attacking this town, and this scene is taken from the perspective of one of the prisoners in the fort, a Dutch prisoner whose crew was tortured by the Inquisition. So I'll just get started here. Pieter counted his blessings when the firing ceased, leaving the cells undamaged. He glanced around at the intact walls and bars. Well, perhaps a little damage would have been all right, he thought. It was, after all, only he and his men that needed to remain undamaged. He knew pirates and privateers often raided Rio de la Hacha due to its poor defenses, small garrison, and wealth of pearls. But when the noise of the soldiers had wakened him, he saw from his east-facing window what looked only to be a Spanish warship sailing into the harbor at night, crushing his hopes. When the soldiers' greetings turned to panic and the ship began firing on the fort, he had laughed aloud for nearly the entire attack. His men had stirred from their hopeless dread and uneasy dreams to ask what he could see, though the ship was out of view, but he could not stop laughing long enough to reply. He laughed until tears rolled down his face, and as every shock of cannon fire shook the walls, he laughed anew. It was only when the cannons fell silent that his mirth ceased, and he watched for any opportunity to escape. Unlike many fortresses, the cells in this place were on the upper floor, where only the occasional breeze banished the oppressive heat. It sounded like large sections of the north wall had collapsed, but the cells faced only east and west. With luck, these raiders would check the cells rather than simply looking for plunder or avoiding the ruined fort altogether. However, he could not rely on luck. As far as he knew, it was up to him and his men to escape in the confusion, or at least to claim some small vengeance on their captors before their inevitable executions should they be left alone to rot. Before long, he heard hurrying footsteps approach and the sound of a key turning in the lock. It was the alcaide, the tribunal's jailer, independent of the military command structure. Pieter kept his hands in his pockets and directed a look of flat disdain at him. The man carried a pistol in each hand, and Pieter was wary of him, as he more than likely meant to kill the prisoners in the fortress if the fortress was compromised. But he wanted the alcaide to come closer. "Going well, is it?" he asked tauntingly. He placed his left hand to rest on the bars of his cell and leaned closer. The alcaide advanced on him, pistol pointed at his chest and rage on his face. Pieter was certain that his attitude was more to do with Pieter showing no fear than to do with the battle. "Whatever happens here, it won't help you, Captain," he spat. "I will see to that." "No doubt you will if you can keep your hands steady enough," Pieter said. "Perhaps you should call on your friend the alguacil to hold them steady for you if you're not used to such work." The alcaide's face contorted in its rage. He hated the alguacil, and Pieter knew it. Whenever the alguacil became frustrated with his prisoners, he took it out on the alcaide. Just a little closer, he thought. Pieter wanted to goad the man closer without receiving a pistol shot for his trouble. The alcaide took another step towards the cell, bringing him right next to the bars. He was momentarily at a loss for what to say, but he cocked a pistol, and the look on his face told that he meant his weapon to speak for him. You won't see another dawn," he said. It was all Pieter could do to stand there, leaning against the bars, casually mocking the alcaide rather than bracing for a shot. But he knew Reuben was about to start making a racket in his cell, and he had to be ready. But at that moment, someone else came through the door. "Senor," said a man. Pieter thought it must be a soldier, but he did not avert his gaze from the alcaide. "We must release the prisoners," said the voice. The alcaide spun around. "But you can't," he objected. "The Inquisitors—" But Pieter had sprung into action as the alcaide turned his back. His right hand came out of his pocket with his belt folded up inside it, and he snaked it around the alcaide's throat, gripping the other end in his ready left hand. He pulled with all his might, and the alcaide's head slammed into the cell bars even as the soldier's words sank in. But whether or not he was to be released, he would see the alcaide dead. The alcaide's pistol discharged, causing a collective flinch among the newcomers, but the man dropped both pistols in shock and pain at the assault. Pieter pulled again and again as blood flowed down the iron bars of his cell, and finally he let go, stretched his arms through the bars, and snapped the alcaide's neck. He spat on the body as it slid to the floor, then looked up, surprised to see that no one had stepped any closer to help the alcaide. Pieter could see that it was a lieutenant who had entered with a corporal and some other men close behind him. "Did you see that, Corporal?" asked the lieutenant. "How he killed the alcaide before we could get to him?" "Wasn't a thing we could have done, sir," agreed the corporal. Of course, Pieter thought. The alcaide had hated the alguacil for exactly the same reason the soldiers hated the alcaide. When he was frustrated, he took it out on them. Nothing so irked soldiers like taking orders from a civilian who had virtually no power, yet who could still give them orders and antagonize them without fear of retribution. Pieter and the large Negro standing behind the lieutenant laughed at the same time, and Pieter shifted his attention to these other men who had come to his cell. His heart leapt. These must be the raiders, he thought. They even had a small native woman with them, and Pieter would have assumed that she was just a local guide had she not been armed as heavily as any of them. If you wouldn't mind putting your belt back on, sir, I'll let you out, said the corporal. Only I'd hate to get strangled with it, or worse, for your pants to fall down. You understand.
So the background of meeting Ozgur, we actually met, about maybe 5 years ago at Rain Taxi. When, do you happen to know, was it 2015? I'm thinking it must have. I had a booth there for Gabriel's Horn, and you were passing out business cards when you still had just an ebook.
I believe it was 2014, because 2015. Yeah, 2015 was the year that I got hardcovers.
Okay, so yeah, we met then, and we've, I think, pretty much been friends ever since. So we have been on, I don't know, 2 or 3 panels at various conventions like MarsCon and ValleyCon, maybe just 2. But one of those panels, it was you, me, and I know her name, Melissa. No, yeah. She goes by, what's her name? Ivory.
Well, her pseudonym is Ivory Kirk, yes.
Right. Okay, so on one of these panels, we talked about humor and writing. So I find that kind of ironic because your book in a lot of ways is not a comedy.
No.
But I love this. I love the 2 guys just standing back. Oh no! Did you see how he killed him? And we couldn't do a thing to stop him. Yeah, why, yes, sir. What a shame. So.
Well, I deliberately. Yeah. Well, I realized my first book did not have a lot of humor in it, and these are basically pirates. I mean, they're legal pirates, but they're pirates. Uh-huh. And most people seem to think I'm funny, and I thought, why am I not putting this in my books? Uh-huh. And it just wasn't how I wrote. And I thought, okay, I need to try to put a little more humor in book 2. Uh-huh. And so this is a reading. These are all readings from book 2. And
really? Okay. Yeah. I did not realize that and see, it's a good thing I didn't lie and say I finished book 1. Then I would have been caught in my own lie.
You've been like, wait, where was this scene?
Yeah, well, I know we meet Coya, who's coming up in the next reading very, very early in book 1, so I just assumed that reading was from book 1. So, now, there are some eras like World War II, the Civil War, Revolutionary War a little bit, or like the jazz era, the 30s, the 20s, that writers just hit over and over and readers never seem to get tired of. But you picked a rather unusual era at 1660, and we don't get a whole lot. I mean, apart from Pirates of the Caribbean, we don't get a lot of pirate stories. So what drew you to 1660?
Well, there are a couple of answers to that, and even Pirates of the Caribbean is set in the 18th century, like early-ish, early to mid 18th century, and the complex answer is that it's a great time period for, like, there's enough civilization in the New World for there to be structure, like infrastructure, for there to be like norms, but there's enough wilderness. There's still enough wilderness for there to be a lot of possibility for adventure. It's still a frontier. It's still largely uncivilized, unpopulated. And I've always been sort of more fascinated by the pre-American period of colonialism. But then there's an easier answer, which is that I grew up playing Sid Meier's Pirates video game, and the default was always 1660.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like you could pick your time period.
So, yeah. Okay, well, that is really interesting, and so that answers why pirates, too. So you have a pretty varied background. You've had multiple sorts of careers and jobs. You want to talk briefly about some of them and interests?
Sure. Well, when I was in high school,
briefly, right? Yeah.
when I was in high school, I wanted to go into astrophysics. Oh, sorry, I missed that.
And you studied it for a while.
Yeah, I studied. I went to Boston U for astrophysics, and then came back to the U of M for astrophysics, and then I got burnt out and quit because all of my calculus teachers were sort of that variety where they don't explain how calculus works. They just want you to memorize, and after a while, you just feel like you don't know what you're doing unless you get it on your own. And I sort of checked out. I didn't have much of a social life, and I sort of thought this isn't for me. And I decided I wanted to be a writer, mostly a fiction writer. And I didn't pursue that regularly, as most artists know, until you set a schedule. If you do everything by when you feel like it, you're never going to get anything done. So, but yeah, then in about 2001. I got really heavy into consciousness development. I sort of stumbled on that field, and I thought this is a much more fulfilling kind of answer seeking than astrophysics was. And I got into working on some nonfiction too. And eventually I thought, I'm working on too many things at once. I need to pick one, stick with it, finish it. And that I decided, because of the timing of Pirates of the Caribbean, maybe it was good to sort of pick that genre.
Yeah, it's a great choice. I'm really enjoying the book, and we are ready for beer number 2.
Wow, that was fast. How do we get ready for beer number 2 already?
Yeah,
already.
Yep.
This next reading is from the point of view of an indigenous woman. From Inca.
Yeah, she's like twice over a refugee from the Incan Empire. Like the Incas were basically wiped out 150 years before.
Yeah.
And the story is that she and her people were one of the tribes that fled that area, fled the downfall. And then later on, early in her life, her town was raided by more Spaniards expanding into their territory. So she's like a twice over refugee from her own people.
Got it. But so it is from her point of view, from an excuse me, Central American indigenous person. So I was thinking, what is the indigenous alcoholic drink? And that would be chicha, which is made by chewing corn, and the saliva works like the enzymes in barley malt and breaks down the starch of the corn kernels into simpler sugars that are then fermented naturally, spontaneously fermented. You're not going to find chicha anywhere unless you go to Central America. They still make chicha there.
I've been offered it.
Yeah, I would love to try it. The only place you might find it here, so Dogfish Head has this famous, Sam Calagione, the owner of Dogfish Head, did this series, and in one of the episodes, they made chicha. So he had everybody in their office like chewing corn kernels obsessively. But other than that, you're not going to find chicha anywhere. So I was thinking, well, what's like chicha? Nothing's like chicha. But how can I get at chicha? How can I hint at chicha? So I chose a cream ale. So I have Cowbell cream ale from Urban Growler Brewery in Minneapolis. They're in St. Paul, actually. I'm sorry. They're just across the city limit in St. Paul. So a cream ale, it's also a New World invention. Cream ale was invented in the late 19th century in the U.S. when there were still ale brewers, before the lager brewers completely took over. But the lager brewers were here, and the ale brewers needed something to compete with their pale lagers. So basically, they took an American-style lager and fermented it with ale yeast. And that's kind of the origin of cream ale. But an important part of that, both American lagers and cream ale, is that it uses a large percentage of corn in the grist, in the grain bill. So That's why I gravitated to cream ale in an attempt to hint at chicha. I don't know that you'll like this, Laura. Maybe you will. It's really
We'll
simple,
see.
straightforward.
Cheers.
Enjoy.
This has a really strong smell. I could smell it before it near me. You don't smell that? It usually doesn't jump out at me like that.
It doesn't have that strong a taste.
I can't smell anything.
Here, let me hold it closer. You'll know.
No.
Simple, straightforward. Cream ale is an extraordinary light beer. Nothing that taxes your palate or anything. It's like an American lager with ale yeast. Is really what it is.
It's okay. I probably wouldn't make a great effort to buy it again, but I don't hate it. So
it's great on a summer day.
Yeah, I can see that.
Hot days like we've had the last few days.
Yeah, we've had a couple hot days. Mostly I've been inside and I haven't noticed, but I did go out today, as you know. So, what do we have for reading number 2, Oscar?
Well, reading number 2 is after this raid on the town. The crew raided the Inquisition's vaults, and they found this sort of old Inca relic. It's about the size of a scepter made of solid gold, as much as you can make anything out of solid gold. And she, Coya, one of the 3 main characters here, recognized it, and she's sort of musing over it on the ship on their way out. All right. Coya marveled over the exquisite beauty of the golden staff as she sat in her quarters. She felt the gentle motion of the waves cradling La Mangosta as gingerly as she cradled the staff. She had seen this only once, or one exactly like it, when she was perhaps 8 years of age. It was a holy relic to her people, and it looked as if the sun god, Inti, had preserved it exactly as it had always been. There was not a scratch on it. Under the circumstances, she was disinclined to thank the Spaniards for that. For some time after fleeing her home, Coya's shame had deepened as her memory of her people's customs began to fade. Living outside of a Spanish city and alongside many other tribes and beliefs, as well as those of the Catholic Spanish, only hastened that process. At the same time, it sharpened her sense of loss until at last she simply began to accept it. But this, she remembered. Perhaps the Incas in their great empire that had fallen generations before Coya was born had used these symbols differently. But just as the snake represented the underworld and the condor represented the world of the gods, so the puma had always symbolized the world of humans. There were other legends, which she remembered less clearly, of a golden staff and a great man who carried it on behalf of Inti. But to her people, the staff was always meant as a bridge of respect, remembrance, insight, and homage between the world of people and the world of the gods. It was a symbol of leadership, and the high priest of Inti presented it to the new leader of his people when that person proved worthy of the responsibility. The Europeans called it a scepter because it was small, but to her people this had always been the golden staff, regardless of its size. She had even asked her mother about it once, and her mother had told her the story. Long ago, it is said the golden staff was as long as an ordinary staff, but as the wisdom of our rulers grew with their age, so did the burden of the gold, pulling them into the underworld. Some said that when a ruler could no longer bear the weight of the staff, he was no longer fit to rule, and the staff should be passed on. But others said wisdom itself was a burden, leaving marks on our rulers for all to see, naturally pulling their bodies into the underworld in due course. They said it was unfair to speed them to their graves before their time, and the burden of the gold should be lessened, and our rulers should be burdened by only the head of the staff. This argument continued for many days, and the priests went into contemplation to seek for guidance. When they emerged after much time in communion and contemplation, they gathered the speakers of both arguments together. To those who wished to reduce the staff to the head of the puma, they said, "Wisdom is not a burden, it is a gift of the gods. Wisdom opens us to the strength of the gods. Wisdom gives us new life. Wisdom lifts us above the world of the snake. Wisdom is not a burden, wisdom is freedom." And to those who wished to keep the staff as it was, they said, "Wisdom pulls us toward the gods, and gold is our divine beacon to Inti, but it is of the earth. Too much gold pulls us toward the underworld. Too much gold pulls us away from our wisdom. Do not the Spaniards teach us this lesson every day? A little gold shows us divine remembrance. Too much gold makes us forget our rightful place in this middle world. At these words, the argument erupted anew, but the priests were prepared for it. They declared that the burden of the gold and the strength of the wisdom to bear it should moderate each other, as Inti is moderated by his wife and sister, Mamakia, as the sun is moderated by the moon. Those who wished for the staff to remain unchanged claimed that this was already the case, and that a leader should have enough wisdom to bear the full weight of the staff. Those who wished for the staff to be reduced to only the puma head claimed that both the burden and the wisdom would be balanced if the change was made. It was then that the priest proclaimed that the staff should be reduced to exactly half its weight in gold. This proclamation angered all parties, as compromises always do, though it most angered those who wished for things to remain the same, as changes always do. But to them the priest said, "Your burden is too heavy for wisdom to maintain, because a ruler's wisdom is only half the wisdom of his people." And to the others they said, "Your burden is not heavy enough for wisdom to notice, because a ruler's burden is double what his body alone knows." These words confounded the speakers, who, convinced that the priests accused them of being neither wise enough nor burdened enough, began to quarrel anew. But the wife of the first speaker had listened as she toiled, irritated that her husband and all the others sat before the priests and did nothing all day, and the priest's words fascinated her. Without thinking, she burst forth and asked, "What do you mean to say?" At that moment, the moon passed in front of the sun, and the men, who were angry at her outburst, fell into awed silence, as though her complaint itself was the attack happening against Mamakia in the sky. The wife of the first speaker stood alone, unafraid, and when the attack finally ceased, the priests said with one voice, "The burden must be shared with the full wisdom of our people, for our full wisdom to feel it. The staff shall be split, and a second staff made from the first. The second staff shall be held by a queen, and together our rulers will share their wisdom and their burden," and all could see that their words were divine. "But how shall a woman know to rule?" they asked, though now from curiosity rather than disbelief. "How does the moon know to pull the waters closer to the sun?" the priest said for an answer. "She does not know, but she already does this. The rulers will know together how to rule, just as they have always done in the world of the puma. We already have this wisdom. It is time to plant the golden staff at the temple anew to show that we now understand this has ever been true." "But how shall the staff serve as a staff if it is only half high?" asked the first speaker. The priests laughed and replied, "Would you walk a path through forest or over mountain with gold as your support? A wooden staff is as long as it needs to be to fulfill its function. A wooden staff is made as a support in our world. A golden staff is made to serve as a bridge between our world and that of the gods. When you need that bridge, you fuff." And so the matter was settled. All agreed the speaker should rule as king, and his sister, the first speaker's wife, should rule as queen. And thus has it been ever since. Should probably wrap up there, because I think we went a bit long.
Yeah, and it's a great place to end. So one of the things I really like about Coya, and obviously I've read a little bit of the book where she's introduced, we don't see as much of her here. She's very realistic. I think a lot of writers today, the woman always has to be, outspoken and bold and tougher than all the men and, all this. And you wrote somebody who's very real. I mean, she does have these amazing fighting skills, really, but they're from survival. She's somebody who really is scared by life, who doubts herself, who doesn't really see maybe much, if any, good in herself. Why did you decide to write her like that?
Well, I thought that perfect characters can get boring, but also I thought, well, at each point I try to write characters like, how would they actually respond to the situation? And she's been alone so long that she's had to survive. Mm-hmm. But she's not been surrounded by anyone who could evaluate her abilities or give her any feedback. All she knows is that she's succeeded at surviving. Mm-hmm. She has no sense of what anybody else would think of that. But she's scarred. She's spent her life in a state of constant panic or anxiety. She's not used to working with a team like you would with a privateer crew. And so I like painting in those deficiencies. They show her character just as much as her strengths.
Right, I agree with that, and I think it also gives her room to grow because we see right from the start that she's startled that Captain Roy Toppings accepts her. She's very hesitant. Well, is your crew going to accept me? She's shocked that he's treating her with any respect at all. And I like that, and it kind of raises to me the question: have you ever gotten any negative feedback about her?
Honestly, I wasn't sure what would happen when I first put the first book out because I was writing a woman character, and I was also writing a black character. Different, my three main characters. That's two of them. But I've never gotten a negative ounce of feedback on her.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, but I've had some people say that my female main character is not, she's weak, she's not strong enough. And part of it is, well, that's kind of the point because of some of the things she's gone through. And Coya, in a way, is the same. So, Michael, are you there? We've lost Michael. Why did you pick the Incans instead of the Mayans or the Aztecs as your background?
Well, I guess I always, again, I grew up playing a lot of Sid Meier's Pirates, and you're always looking for a buried Inca treasure or something. And I grew up on a few other pirate stories that mentioned them, and I thought, I hear about the Aztecs, I hear about the Mayans. I didn't really hear much about the Incas after they were wiped out. And South America is sort of closer to the areas that most of the pirates were operating in. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I should really delve into this a bit more, see what the natives of that area would be like. And that takes you back to Incas and the related tribes and the Quechua people. Mm-hmm. So it was really more sort of a matter of geographical convenience and just exposure to media as a kid.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of interesting for me to look just briefly into these three tribes and see the ways in which they sort of overlapped and didn't always, just the general years. And it did make me wonder why the Incas, because as you say, they had been largely wiped out, 150 years before this book starts?
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think that the Incas are a little bit mysterious is that they had no discernible written language. We're only now starting to realize that some of the quipus, or the knot tying records they had, were actually alphabetical instead of numerical. We already knew about the numerical ones. So there wasn't a lot for scholars to study, and so you just don't hear about them quite as much. Anything you would hear would come from Spanish scholars who had gone to the area at the time and come back and written things about it.
So that brings us to the question, what kind of research do you do? And if there is not necessarily a whole lot known about the Incas, where did you draw your information from, such as about this golden staff?
Oh, the golden staff is entirely 100% made up. This is the beauty of historical fiction. I was very proud. I read this section. Wasn't sure if it'd be 5 minutes or not, but I read this section. I was very proud of the day I wrote that because it is entirely made up, except for some of the imagery in there tracks back to Incan culture. But I thought, these are people who have been refugees from that culture for over 100 years. And how did their legends change? I get to make that up.
Yeah, well, you did a great job because I know that you do thorough research. I know that you, like me, value research and historical accuracy. So I believe pretty much everything in your books.
That's why I have the disclaimer at the beginning. But
that's a textbook to me.
But yeah, no, I do most of my research online, but not all of it. But it's amazing what you can find online if you look long enough. Right.
Sometimes you really have to look. But we are ready for beer number 3.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I ran away for a moment because I had to make beer number 3. So beer number 3, again, is not just a beer, it's a cocktail. The other thing that I'm really interested in is beer cocktails.
I wondered.
beer.
I wondered if you were going to do that.
Yes. So this is a beer cocktail. Again, I was thinking about what were these people drinking. There is a cocktail mentioned in this reading that sounds pretty interesting. But I also was thinking, okay, so what else are they drinking? Rum. Rum was a big part of the Caribbean trade. And so I came up with a rum beer cocktail. So this is a rum stout cocktail. The site that I took it from didn't give it a name. So it's just a rum stout cocktail, but it consists of 1.5 ounces of rum, 1.5 ounces of jalapeno ginger syrup,
Wow.
1/2 ounce of lime juice, and 5 ounces of stout. It's really quite delicious. It's garnished with a lime wedge.
Rub it in. Rub it in.
Cheers.
All I have is plain old beer. Now I'm kind of jealous. Hold on.
Deschutes Obsidian Stout is the stout that I used.
Yes. Cheers.
Spicy. The ginger comes through really clear. The lime comes through really clear, and it all really blends together well. I thought with 1.5 ounces of simple syrup and rum, it was going to be sticky sweet, but the roasty stout really cuts through that.
I'm glad that I could help you discover a new drink.
I'm very envious that I'm not there to try it.
The jalapeno also, you taste the jalapeno, but the heat isn't super intense.
Sorry,
what is our reading?
My dog is busy trying to destroy my instruments in here. She's excited about a dog outside. Go ahead. Reading number 3.
So this reading, everyone will be pretty clear in a moment why there's a beer cocktail being made in the background. But so the scene is basically Captain Roy Toppings, my third main character. You haven't seen the other one, but he is conducting a little bit of spycraft in a tavern in Santo Domingo, Hispaniola. So we'll get right to that here. La Cueva de Hucia was a more pleasant establishment than Roy had expected from either the Hucia's general reputation or the painted sign outside. He knew Hucias were numerous in this part of Hispaniola and were held in the same esteem as rats. Judging by this sign, the perception had its merits. It was depicted as some sort of hybrid creature derived from beaver, rat, and squirrel. It might be what a porcupine would look like with no quills. The depiction above the door was uninspiring if artfully done, so Roy had not anticipated the rich woods, skillfully carved chairs and beams, colored glass oil lamps, and excellent food he encountered within. The clientele did not seem even vaguely rat-like, and were for the most part well-dressed and gregarious. Morgan himself would be at home here, he thought. Most of Captain Morgan's crew would stand out like Pieter in a goldsmith's workshop in such an environment, and Roy wondered which of his men had been sent at the time. The sole way in which the place lived up to its name, Hucia's Cave, was the lighting. The stained glass had the effect of muting the light, and every stick of wood furnishing was dark. Only the mugs and glasses were of clear crystal, and under the dim lights they twinkled like stars in a clear night sky. It was almost as if the murky lighting inclined people to call out to one another in the dark and befriend as many of their fellows as possible. It was perhaps the friendliest tavern Roy had ever entered. At first, he worried about discretion, wanting only to speak with those he sought out. But upon every unknown patron's entry, nearly a dozen others cheerfully hailed them, eager to conduct the same friendly, exuberant interrogation they had with Roy. It put him in mind of the best parties he had ever been to, except this one was apparently held night after night. Soon he had talked with nearly everyone in the tavern, and the task of learning what he could of those around him seemed laughably easy. The man he was here to observe, Fabio, was no exception. Either he was innocent in this business with the French pirate, or he was a very good liar. Or perhaps he had been paid only the one time months ago to weave one tale for one purpose, and was otherwise just like everyone else in this place. "What business brings you to Santo Domingo, Miguel?" asked Fabio. My captain is in the area seeking to buy shipments of tobacco to bring south, said Roy, who had introduced himself as Miguel Bautista. And you? What do you do here in the city? I own several small fishing crafts, said Fabio. My crews fish the waters mainly off the coastline west of town. The proceeds allow me some freedom to take care of my other important affairs. He raised his wine glass for emphasis, and the others laughed. Roy laughed along with them, but privately he doubted Fabio lived as well as he did on fishing profits alone. Still, Fabio's boats probably allowed him to keep eyes on much activity along the coast, and it was little wonder that Henry Morgan had heeded his forewarning that led to the discovery of Valdez's ship. We understood these could be dangerous waters for traders, Roy said. It is one reason for us to conduct our trade here rather than in smaller plantation settlements with lower prices. Perhaps your fishermen know the truth of the matter? You are referring to the pirate attacks, asked Fabio. Roy nodded. My crews don't fish far from the coast, but yes, they have seen strange ships from time to time. Fabio's assertion seemed deliberately vague in a way Roy was accustomed to dealing with. Perhaps I could buy you a drink or two while you tell me more, Roy suggested. Ah, a man who knows the value of a good piece of gossip, I see, said Fabio, clapping him on the back. Fabio ordered a strange and expensive concoction involving ginger, molasses, rum, orange juice, and some sort of lemon liqueur. What do you call that peacock of a drink? Roy asked, genuinely curious. The English who invented it have their own versions, but here we call it a ginger plantation, said Fabio, but most of us call it 8 slaves and a boat. Why is that? Roy inquired. Fabio sighed. There was a padre attached to one of the San Juan trade offices many years ago who was very good with figures, he began. I don't know if it was his task or if he took it upon himself, but he cataloged the cost in non-monetary resources for the production of luxury goods. Taking into account the import of slaves, wastage, storms, attacks, disease, harsh labor conditions, and every other damn thing you might imagine, he pronounced that the average cost of every bottle of spirits produced in the Caribbean was 2 slaves and 1 boat. Unsurprisingly, trade officials found this tally to be ridiculously high, and it became somewhat of a running joke in the near colonies to catalog similarly every item that might be deemed lavish or decadent. I imagine that the oranges, molasses, rum, ginger, and lemon spirits in this mixture sounded as though they must cost 8 slaves and a boat. Fabio took a satisfying sip from his glass. Mind you, it tastes much better than 8 slaves and a boat. Know that for a fact, do you? Roy joked. As little as Ajuban would have approved of the name, the drink sounded and smelled quite appealing.
Nice. I enjoyed that one. And my immediate question, as I said before, I know that you do very thorough research. Was there really such a padre? Was there really such a system of accounting?
There was not that I'm aware of, but it's exactly the sort of thing that you could see happening. And it was...
You can.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It's one of those little details of ordinary life that never makes it into history books. And I thought, a little bit of humor in ordinary everyday life mixed in. But there is a drink that this is based on, which is called a switchel. And this drink, it was available in the American colonies too, and along the southern coasts, it used citrus. But further inland, they would replace that with vinegar, which sounds completely vile to me. But
it kind of does.
So, yeah. And later on in this, the next scene, there's someone else comes in and talks about another drink that's similarly named down in South America.
Well, and that's the great thing about being very accurate historically. You can throw in this stuff, and it sounds totally real. I was really struck in this scene by the vivid descriptive detail, this dim room and the stained glass and the crystal like sparkling stars. And it made me wonder, did you do anything to study the writing craft, or do you just read a lot, or it just comes naturally?
Honestly, I just read a lot, and I have a big, long history in role-playing games where you're describing things verbally to a table full of people. But otherwise, no, it's just practice, and I try to see the setting in my head and then describe it. I read a lot of Tolkien. But it was a fun scene to write. I wanted it to sound like an appealing place and an appealing drink. And I find that people who read that scene, they want to go to that tavern and they want to drink that drink. And you can imagine at my next party, there's going to be a drink based on that.
It does sound like a great place to hang out. And I want to say that the ingredients of that drink match very well with the drink that I have in front of me. You got your rum, you've got your citrus, you've got ginger.
Michael, did you like the drink?
Yeah, it's good.
So we have to post this recipe on the website.
Yeah, I will. When I post the episode, I'll put it on the website.
Yeah. I should cut in real quick here and say, I felt very good about this for two reasons. One, the description of it, but two, I'm basically telling people how to mix a drink, and I have never had an alcoholic drink in my life.
Wow.
So when it succeeds, I'm really happy.
But there again, my main character is this horrible, obnoxious womanizer who's getting drunk and gambling all the time. I've never done any of that either. So.
Right. I can barely swim. I'd make a terrible pirate,
Tell us just a little bit, in the last minute we have here, you're working on a nonfiction book about narcissism. Can you give a brief overview of the book and what led you to work on it?
Well, the title tells quite a story by itself. I'm going to call it the Narcissist to English Dictionary. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that narcissists, they're just like everyone else. They speak the same actual language, but when they use the words, they don't mean the same thing. Like privacy and secrecy can become somewhat interchangeable to them. For example, responsibility is something that's only for other people. And this is sort of a book based on my study in consciousness development. It's supposed to be a book that helps people not only notice narcissists, but notice when they're seeing narcissistic behavior and be able to predict what those people will do, because people throw this word around a lot, narcissist, but then they're consistently surprised by the things narcissists do. And I thought, if you really understand narcissism, you wouldn't be surprised by any of this. Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating subject, one I've done a lot of reading on. When is this book coming out?
Oh, sometime after I finish writing it. I'm like not even a full chapter into it. So, it's pandemic.
Always a bad plan to release a book before it's written. I've tried it. So, do you have any upcoming events that you would like people to know about?
I don't have any events. They've all been canceled because of the pandemic.
That's a terrible question in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I launched my second book in October, late October. And then I shoved all of them into a storage unit and thought, okay, springtime, that's when all the conventions start up. And then it was also when COVID started up. So they're pretty much, I've got 2 tons of books languishing in my storage unit.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
A lot of books.
Yeah, you should do a big online sale or event or something. Michael, I'm assuming no events coming up?
No public events. I do have, so I just recorded, we did them live via Zoom, but the recordings will be up during the dates of the state fair. I did 2 Minnesota 6-pack things for the Star Tribune. I don't know. I know they'll be the recordings will be up during the state fair. That's all I know.
Okay, so can people see that online?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that the Star Tribune is doing all kinds of virtual state fair stuff. So just look Star Tribune virtual state fair, and it'll be somewhere in the listing.
Okay, and I have no events. This comes as a shock to nobody. 6 months ago. I might go out on my porch or something, something really exciting. Where can people find you online, Michael?
aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint on some of the socials. Mm-hmm. They can find us at Books Brew. I'm going to start that over again. Book Brews. Is that right? Now, see, I've forgotten what we are.
N.
Book Brews.
I don't know.
More brews than books. on Instagram. We're Books and Brews with Laura Vosico and Michael Agnew on Facebook. And yeah, that's where we are.
You get a kick out of that every time you say it, like the
I do.
50-syllable title. And then booksandbrews.net, and we also have a YouTube channel. And I do think that people should subscribe to our YouTube channel because, you know, we're feeling kind of lonely there, and it would be the nice thing to do. It would be like the honorable thing to do. I am at bluebellschronicles.com. I think lauravosica.com points to the same site. I'm not sure I'd bother going there because I haven't updated it and I need to. It's on my list of things to do. And Michael, you're going to ask me?
Well, do we know where they can find Ozgur? We need to know that.
Ozgur, I forgot you.
Hi. No, you can find my work at OzgurKShahin.com. That's OzgurKShahin.com. I haven't updated in a while either, so go there if you want to forget that COVID exists, because there's no indication of it there.
I like that. Yeah, no COVID in the 1660s.
And now, who is our next guest?
Who is our next guest? Our next guest is actually a first-time author. Her name is Lisa Jareen. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Lisa has written newsletters and business communications professionally for more than 20 years. She comes from a long line of storytellers, and for most of her life has channeled her creative energy into retelling and embellishing her family's history. Her book, Without Words, grew from the seeds of her own ancestors' lives as South Dakota immigrants. So her first book, but she also has a children's book coming out soon too. So she'll be telling us about both of those.
Great. Sounds good. Ozgur, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This has been Books and Brews, episode 17. It is 17.
It is 17.
So thanks for tuning in, and cheers.